Hello, and welcome to Learn, Make, Learn, where we share qualitative and quantitative perspectives on products to help you make better. My name is Ernest Kim, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Joachim Groger. Hey, Joachim, how's it going?
I'm good. I have to confess something to everyone here. I've already had a cocktail, so full disclosure, I forgot we were doing this tonight. And I had a cocktail, I was kicking back, and then as I was sipping it, I was like, something's happening at 8 o'clock tonight. I'm so sure something's happening at 8 o'clock. Anyway, I'm so sorry.
Oh, no,
I'm totally fine.
I like it.
But, I'm just, in the interest of full transparency of this podcast,
It's going to be...
I thought I should share that.
Learn, Make, Learn after dark.
Yeah.
Well, this is episode 23, and today we're going to discuss design, primarily interface design, with our guest, Nate Grubbs. Now, we've touched on the topic of design many times over the course of our past 22 episodes, but this will be our first opportunity to dig into the topic with an expert practitioner. So let's dive right in. And Joachim, given your relationship with Nate, I'll hand it over to you to get the conversation started.
Sounds good. Well, we have Nate Grubbs here. We're very excited. This is our second guest on the podcast, and we get to talk about design and specifically interaction design. So I think we should just start with the basics. And also, we should just be very, very clear that all the views expressed here are ours alone, nothing to do with our employers. So Nate, you're here as an individual, not as a representative of anything, as am I. So, what's your story? How did you get into interaction design? And what's the journey?
So my name is Nate Grubbs. I am a, product designer, interactive designer, UX designer. There's so many terms thrown around these days that it does get a little confusing. But my background, it was used to just be kind of graphic design. Kind of did a lot of that with advertising agencies. Moved over to Amsterdam, found myself into doing product design, even some physical, digital, blended experiences. And now I'm back in Seattle, working with a place called Teague, which likes to say that they're the first design consultancy born in 100 years ago. I've lots of design consultancies backgrounds. If I were to simplify it to a lot of people ask me what I do. It's often, digital design.
I think we talked about interaction design being the starting point for that. So is it fair to say that it is mostly the interfaces that we interact with a computer system? Is it the design of a surface that is connected to a computer, or how should we be thinking about this?
Yeah, and I think maybe I'm probably speaking to the mood of the industry, which feels like they're in a bit of an existential crisis of who are we as designers, because there are people who came in from a strictly visual background. I just want to make things look pretty. I make websites look pretty. I don't care about how to make them or they operate. I just want to make nice pictures and text on screen. That can be sometimes one camp. There's another camp of people that just love, getting the problem of 1,000 pages on a website or a software application that's extremely complicated. And they just like working with engineers and trying to figure out how to make this usable for people. How do we make this software easy to use? How do we make it so that it can work for a consumer or work for a professional? That's more in the interaction design, is typically in that more kind of technical minded things. I think, and then UX design was probably trying to blend a little bit of both the highly technical wiring with that visual, thinking, hey, these things still should look pretty. And I think user experience kind of was born out of that. Let's make it look pretty and usable at the same time.
Lots of little threads that we can pull on here for the conversation. But I want to start with kind of the first conversation that we had in a coffee shop here in Seattle. And we were just whining, to be blunt. Basically, an episode of this podcast. Why is design kind of thoughtless? Where are the people that are trying to be innovative yet still serve a customer need? And then you brought up this blog post by Alex Morel, The Age of Average. And it seemed to encapsulate a lot of themes that I feel like are bothering us all in this room, but also things that you have to contend with every single day. And just briefly, Alex Morel's piece on the Age of Averages, basically, everything kind of looks beige now. It's all merging into this middle, inoffensive kind of space. You had a phrase to summarize this as well, Nate, that I appreciate, which is like for the coffee shop vibe, it's a Scandinavian style coffee shop, a little minimal, playing Kurang Bin on the soundtrack. It's not offensive. It's not terrible. It's just kind of there. But how do you take this idea that everything has kind of merged into this common beige mass of mediocrity? Let's be really inflammatory about it. Like, what's your take on all of that?
Yeah, but this is just full of hot takes tonight, right? Where's my cocktail here? But like, I don't mind Scandinavian design, and
exactly.
They have that vibe that we all just need sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, is there anything underneath this? I think that's maybe one of the questions we want to ask about it. But I think there's something else going on there. None of those things are wrong, but it just feels like it's been taken too far. There was this authenticity or originality to it, but then it just gets recycled and recycled and recycled and recycled because, hey, that's what good things look like. I'm starting a coffee shop. It should look like this. Yeah. And I think that's where it starts to feeling like a little bit too much, or where is the soul in all of this?
Yeah, where is the soul in all of this? And I guess that then that's the question that's top of my mind when I think about an interaction with a digital system or a computer. Like, how do you get the soul across? How do you avoid falling into the average way of thinking and trying to actually get that?
Well, I think it is a wide open question. I think that is a little bit of the soul searching that's happening because, again, maybe I'll bring out not only the hot takes, but the old man vibes where back in my day,
wow.
No, I think because when I started, it was, fresh out of school. I was doing, went to an advertising agency because that's where all the cool design was going to be. And, people that valued this. And at the time, this was early 2000s, to age myself here. And it was a very experimental time. We were making Flash websites, which, right before that, it was tables. Literally, people were making rows and tables for their websites. And so it really was a mind bend to think of it new ways. And I think with advertising back then, it was you're creating an experience. You want to create an experience for a brand. What's the mood? What's the theme? What's the concept of our website that we're going to make? And that was, we still thought of the content, but that was almost at the forefront was like, hey, what do we want people to what do we want them to leave with when they visited this thing? And it seems like it's just, we've gone down this route where everything is a website, everything is an app, everything is, there's so many more digital experiences now that I think it's, and time is limited and go back to function and, let's just make this happen. Let's make this work. Let's ship this as fast as we can. And I think a lot of that, there's a lot of that actually at first that was interesting to me. That sort of puzzling of, oh, hey, this is like, it's doing that design, but now it's got this puzzle of how do I make all of these things work together? How do I make this a seamless experience? And I think that's what first drew me into the interaction side of things was to, it was a puzzle. It was like playing one of those games where, you're doing the action and then all of a sudden you get to this puzzle that you have to figure out. And I'm like, oh, this is fun. I like this. Yeah. But I think it just got a little maybe out of hand, just this focusing so much on function that we kind of, because I think even interaction designers like, oh, visual design, they're not doing anything real. We're doing the real work. They're just making things look pretty. And I think it got a little bit lost of the sort of polarity of design where one thought the other was better. And I think we kind of have lost a little bit of this holistic thinking about products and what people want to get out of that experience.
It's interesting that you say something that I don't think happens very often, or we don't even think about because we're so surrounded by these digital experiences. You were talking about the Flash sites and asking the question, what is the feeling that we want the person to leave and remember when they've closed the page? Which is a very different thing and mode that we're in right now, which is just keep them locked in, binge. And it, you never end that experience going like, wow, that was mind altering or something, but thinking back to the Flash stuff, and I checked this out after you'd mentioned this to me, but Donnie Darko, you had mentioned that this was like a good example of Flash design that was experiential as opposed to functional. It still did something which helped advertise the movie.
It was actually hard to use, even, I would say.
Yeah, but like for those Flash websites, they still kind of haunt me for being so unusable, but in a good way. Is this even part of the conversation anymore, or is it just get them to do the thing, transact, and let's move on?
The short answer is no. It's not part of the conversation anymore. And, one of the things I was thinking about, going back to that Flash thing, when I said it was hard to use, and that was actually some of the point when they made some of these things. They wanted you to click around. They wanted you to they wanted it to be difficult to find out what the content. It just made it even more intriguing. And I even remember there was a website, I was going to say this stuff felt like art back then. And I think even for myself, I remember there was a time, again, that, early in my career, maybe I think I broke up with a girl or something, and I just felt, I need to do something different. And I was like, I know I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to make this best portfolio website ever, making it in Flash. And I had this concept that I even to this day, I like the concept. I wanted this. There's kind of, there's like this wallpaper, and you could sort of click on this thing. There's like a little crack in the wallpaper, and you could click on it, and it would just open up a little bit more. And then eventually you would actually break a hole in the wall, and everything else would just fall away. And it would just be like just the end of the website. Like your experience just stopped. And I think that's what I wanted people to get there and just be like, hey, it's done. Leave. I think that's a thing that we don't think about in terms of with experiences anymore. It's not, we think of that as cinema. We think of that as, I'm going to go to the movies. I'm going to do this experience. And our typical interaction design is very much just function. And, if we have time and if we have resources, we'll try to make it look pretty at the end of the phase or something like that. And I think that's about the extent. I don't think any of us really think about our work as art in terms of the way that I feel like the design industry maybe used to think about their digital design.
I think too that maybe part of it is back in the early days, it was so much more of a medium for individual expression. Even if you're doing work for an agency, you often were working in a pretty small team. Maybe you were the only designer, and you had a lot of leeway. Or if you're doing your own personal site, whereas today it's just become such a commercialized medium, and so corporatized that now if it's a site for any sort of a brand, it's probably a ginormous team of people working on it across many different functions that didn't exist back in the early days. But something, I forget who said it. One of you mentioned creativity, but going back even further, this is like an old fogey show, but, pre-web, I don't know if either of you recall this at all, but there was this thing called Kai's Power Tools. Have you guys ever heard of this? There were a set of plugins for Photoshop and Corel Paint, I think. And they had just the craziest interface. It was like this super punk rock sort of, it looks like, Swedish avant-garde art. It was created by this German computer scientist named Kai. I forget his last name. We'll share some info about this. But it was a really, I remember this because this is when I was coming up, just starting out in design. And I was just so blown away. I thought it was terribly garish, but it was so distinct, had such a clear point of view. And it was introduced in 1992. It no longer exists. The company got folded into Corel at some point. But I thought I'd share just a couple of quotes that kind of spoke to why it was so special for people. this first one comes from a person who used it. His name is Felix Lapointe. This is from a blog post. He said, "What made Kai's power tools truly special was its sense of innovation and experimentation. The plugins were not just tools, they were a playground for creative minds. They encouraged you to try new things, to break the rules, and to explore the possibilities of digital art." And I thought it was, that's a great way to put it. That's very much how I felt about it too. And then I'll just read you really a quick quote from the creator, Kai. This is from an interview he did with The Atlantic way back in 1997. And I think this is the part that kind of, something one of you said kind of clicked with this. But he said, the analogy I always use is that of Sony's inventing the camcorder. All the movies of weddings and babies are ludicrous if watched under the guideline of cinematography, but the camcorder is not a shortcut to Citizen Kane. In that sense, I do not like my tools to be approached as one-click art shortcuts to Mona Lisa, but as beautiful aids for playing with your own brain. I just love that idea, and it's just the sort of thing that you just don't see anymore, right? I mean, like this idea of, I'm just going to put this tool out here for you to play with your own brain versus to get as many transactions as possible, maximize my click-through rate or blah, blah, blah. And, after I did 7 rounds of A/B testing to get to the right shade of blue. I mean, I guess this does sound a bit old fogyish, but it does feel like a lot of that more art-driven approach to this space has been lost. But I have not been a practitioner in some time. It sounds like you have experienced this as well, though, Nate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even when you were bringing up those plugins, I remember early in, I think I was still in school, but there was something with Illustrator. Illustrator is one of these softwares that you can draw things in. And there's some glitch that if you inverted some part of the thing, it would make this crazy, wild vector geometric thing at the tails of things. And it was almost just, I think they just messed up how it displayed. But people started using this as sort of the style, and it was just these really sharp triangles going all over the place. And it was something I enjoyed because it was the trend that we were all doing. And it was just it was someone screwing up. And I think that's a little bit of the things that we kind of miss sometimes, is those happy accidents, right, or those things that the imperfections that actually make us who we are. And I think maybe that's even going back to that original thought. It's like the coffee shop. It's like, it's too perfect. And I think what's supposed to be good is it's supposed to be human. It's supposed to be messed up. It's supposed to be a little bit dirty. It's supposed to be a little bit like just not right or not all put together. And I think that's maybe speaks to some of that idea a little bit.
That's so interesting because it's the exact opposite of everywhere where we are. No one's taking risks. Maybe that's another way to put it. Do you think everyone's just scared, Nate? Is everyone just scared of failing? That this kind of, especially in UX design, I find people are very, very careful. And as Ernest was alluding to, like A/B testing till you figure out it's actually that blue that we want. Is it that infiltration of the false precision that technology has allowed us to lean on? We have these tools so we can precisely identify it as, but really we can't. Of course not. It's a vibe that ultimately is the thing that decides it. So is it that the false precision, or is it just general conservatism? Like we're too scared to try something. The stakes are too high. What is your sense of that?
I do think that there is a lot of things to be afraid of. I feel like maybe that's just an element of our time and where we are in the history of everything, really. That fear is a motivating factor for a lot of people in lots of different ways. I think it also depends on where you work. I mean, I think if you're working for big tech corporations or even just big organizations in general versus a small consultancy, they're all going to think of things differently. It's also about your company culture and trust. Like, do your bosses trust that you're going to get this work done? And I think that's some things that is easy to get lost, that your project managers don't trust that you're going to get this done. And, because it is something you have to communicate really well with your project managers. I mean, even myself, I'm still learning how to tell my project manager, hey, I know this is what you want from me today, but I am going to have that, but I need to explore this first. It's going to take me this much time to do it. And it gets into that. This is one of the thoughts I was thinking about. Like, we've gotten so much into this. I don't know if you guys know the agile or scrum mentalities about how we work. It's, let's just break everything down into tasks and assign those tasks to people. And we have these sprints. So we have a 2-week sprint that we're going to get everything done, these amount of tasks done for this sprint and this time. But I think there is times where you really have to pause and say, hey, is this useful? Where is this going? I need to pause and think, what's the bigger experience that I'm making right now? And I think a lot of people just don't have that either time to do that, or especially as a designer, it's either you may not even have the agency. You may be earlier in your career and you don't want to stop the flow of everything happening to bring up your concern about something. There's a lot of things to be worried about as a designer. So I think there's those things. And I think, obviously companies want product shipped quickly. Clients want their work done in an efficient manner, and they don't want to feel like they're wasting their budgets on hiring another consultancy to do that. And so I think there is this tendency to, if you just put it simply, just play it safe. And hey, maybe I can't do this cool thing this time, but next time I'll have that opportunity. And then you have that fear of, hey, what if there isn't a next time? Maybe my whole career is just going to be doing these boring things. And so I think, I think there is things to be afraid of, but I don't think we need to let that stop us as a designer. I was trying to think about this as in terms of like, well, what do I do as a designer for this? I think it's always about trying to collect as much of your own inspiration from outside sources. It's always, hey, what did I see someone else do? Especially when it comes to like innovation, there's lots of talk of this, I forget the term for it, but like kind of a lateral market. Like it's kind of similar to our market, a near market, maybe is the term. So it's like, oh, what are these things? What are they doing? And how can we apply that in a different way to our market, which does bring about some new change. So I think there is things of just keeping your eyes open. I think you also have to lean into your own personal interests. What is it that you love? And how can you bring that to the table with what you do? And I think if you work with trusting managers or you have a relationship with the people that you work with, they will give you that space to do that. I've been told by my bosses to say, hey, yeah, if you think something can be done differently, spend half a day thinking about that. Don't spend a whole week on it, but do give yourself some space to think about how we could do this differently. We want to do that. We want to think about this differently. But I feel like I am at a place where I am given that sort of that space. One more thing on the perfection element. I was thinking about this in terms of like denim. When you buy denim, it's stiff, it's clean, it's like everything that, just wear it a while and it's going to get better. And, those best jeans are the things that are worn in the right places. And I think we've got like this reverse thing where it's like, let's try to strip all of that and try to get it as stiff as possible because that's what it should look like on the shelf sort of thing.
One of the things that's given me some hope, because I think there's a lot of reason to be a little bit depressed about the state of design and digital design, but one of the things that's given me some hope is the discourse around Nike. And again, like Joachim said, all of this is our own opinions, doesn't reflect those of our employers. It's also, none of this is inside information, but just referencing a lot of the writing around Nike that's been published in the past few months as Nike's been going through some struggles. One of the most biting pieces that has been referenced quite a bit was from a former brand person at Nike. And I forget his name, but we'll provide a link to this piece. But one of the things he mentioned was that Nike spent too much time focusing on the things they could measure instead of the things they should measure. And I've been excited to see the extent to which even these, very conservative financial publications like the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg have been focused on the fact that Nike hasn't been spending enough time on its brand. They've been focused too much on transactions. So that was kind of exciting to see that, actually there is a recognition that there needs to be a balance, that you can't just be just so singularly focused on transactions and the numbers. If you want to be a brand like a Nike, that has historically been known for innovation, so I guess that's given me some hope that even in the kind of business space, people are talking about things like that.
What you were saying, Ernest, has got me thinking as well, because you mentioned that the idea that Nike got obsessed with focusing on things that it could measure as opposed to things that it couldn't measure, and whether it's measuring the right things. So how do you convince someone to do something new when it's not been measured and is no longer measurable? In a conservative environment, I find that that's essentially impossible, right? Nike has the benefit of having been such a strong brand. It had strong vibes, strong feelings attached to it. So it can always go back and return to that overarching feeling that it gave people, right? Of possibility, potential, fulfilling that potential. But in the user interaction domain, if you're doing it for a new company or a new client, how do you even capture that type of magic? Is that something that can be done, or is it just? And also, maybe this is something to do with the tooling that we have now. Like, everyone uses the same tools, so if you go to 1,000 consultancies, they're all going to give you some Figma workflow, and then that's going to be the mock-up of the app, and everyone's using the same typefaces, and so you're picking between that blue, or that blue, with that button, or that button, or that one, which is the same button. So the question is really, again, like this inherent conservatism. How do you find the little space that's there that you can actually push the boundaries of something? Like, we can't do the stuff that we used to do. What do you do in this space now? Like, what can you do? Nate?
I think sometimes you do have to seek out, as a designer, you have to seek out the places that you want to be and what you want to do, and take the opportunities that you have to do something challenging. I know for myself, I've always tried to find, I've had the luxury of being able to laser focus where I want to work, and just, if I don't get in the first time, I try another time to get into a place, and being able to just talk to people and talk about the things that I like, and, open doors through just having similar interests to people, and having that trust. And I think what I'm trying to say with that is building the trust with these people that you may work with, and saying, hey, yeah, this is the time to do it. And I think even there's the place I'm at now and the previous company I was at, they would say, hey, if this is the project that you want to knock out of the ballpark, then do it. Go for it. Like, because I think we have some agency, we have some, the client trusts us to do this. So if you want to do something, try it. And my last place, I remember there was a company I was like, yeah, this is the one. It was like a smart thermostat. I was like, I'm going to make this amazing. And I think me and another designer just went all out with just these bizarre, out of just crazy ideas, just thinking, something's going to hit here. And I think we did this presentation, and they're just like, okay, cool. We were just looking for some ideas for this thing. They were actually still doing great stuff, but it just, I think, sometimes, you have to fail. Sometimes you have to mess up. You have to be willing to take that risk a little bit. And I think there's a great quote. I don't know how much you know about old graphic designers. Again, bringing in the old man people, old person vibes here. These people are older than me, but there's a couple designers, David Carson and Paula Scher, which are ones that really influenced a lot of my thinking about this. But I remember Paula Scher gave a talk a while ago that was talking about like how to, what you call it, serious play. How do you be a novice at something again? How do I take everything I know and throw it out the window and just start over again? And she talks about this time where she was given an architecture project to do graphics for it. And she just said, I don't know the rules of architecture. I'm just going to do whatever I want to do. I'm going to put graphics on the floor. I'm going to wrap them around the wall, just do whatever I want. And it was a huge moment for her to sort of take this risk, do something crazy, and to learn from that experience. And I think that was a lot of what she a lot of the ways that she thought about these things. I was actually trying to find this quote from her. It was, "This funny thing happened. I found I was no longer at play, but in this solemn landscape of fulfilling an expectation, which was not where I started. That's a terrifying factor because it means that all that's left for you is to go back and find out what the next thing is that you can push, that you can invent, that you can be ignorant about, that you can fail with, because in the end, that's how you grow, and that's all that matters." There's just so many things about it, because she calls it a serious play. It's just, you're just serious about going out there, trying something new. And and she talks about, like, when we start recycling the thing that worked, that's when we get into this path where we keep recycling in it, and it just takes everything out of what was playful in the first place. And I think maybe that goes back to what we were talking about as well, but maybe that's a roundabout answer to your question there. But
no, that's it. That is really the heart of it, isn't it? Is that the willingness to take a risk, and then, as you said, the very scary thing is kind of to fail, which is a very scary thing to confront when you're trying to push it. That gets me thinking, like, what's out there, Nate? Who is pushing the boundaries? Or, put another way, if you had carte blanche, what would it mean? What would you be doing? What are the directions you would want to push into?
Yeah, I think there's something out there that's like, we're trying to find something new. We're trying to find, and it's not just VR. I think everyone's looking for this new theater to play in. So I think there is a lot of just existential sort of thoughts about, what is it that I want to do cool stuff, but I want to break the mold. I want to do something else, but where am I going? And I think there is, we're not really sure. I can't really think of that many interactive companies that are like really, on the cutting edge, or whatever you want to call it, of finding new ways to interact with things. I think it's going to take a little bit more time. I think the AI thing probably will be an interesting way of playing around with crazy ideas that you can get quickly. I think maybe that's one of the benefits of AI, being able to just toss in a prompt and see what it comes out, and maybe be surprised a little bit by that. Some of that may help, but some of it may just, produce UI just that looks like everything else. I think it can go a couple of different directions.
I think, as you were saying, is just in terms of tooling and inspiration, it seems like the AI would only be useful for this effort when it goes wonky, right? So instead of just pulling something, some representation of something that is in its memory, it just mashes up something completely wrong. And then that becomes
AI hallucination.
Exactly. So back to the earlier idea that it's actually the wonky brokenness of something that can be the friction that gets you the innovative spirit moving forwards.
There's that whole idea of like the Japanese, the idea that these broken vessels that, they mend it with gold and it becomes something completely new. And the sort of brokenness of it was, not to get too philosophical here, but that's what made it this unique thing. Yeah. It's something they're willing to tap into, an idea of that. Yeah. And I think you had mentioned to me the idea of Bauhaus, how that affected design and what we think. Because I think to a certain extent, the modern way of thinking about design in any terms really had a fundamental basis in Bauhaus and how they approached a lot of their things, that sort of minimalism thing, which was a response to the previous culture of the Art Nouveau, where ornate everything. And I think that they had that idea of form follows function. That was their sort of principle for everything, that the form follows what this is. So it's a chair, but the form follows that. And I think we've kind of flipped that now. The function follows the form is a little bit of how we're thinking about it now in terms of how we think about websites.
I think early PC design highlights the highly constrained nature of graphics, and how can you create a meaningful user interface with very few pixels to represent anything. That's one where the design had to match the function of this machine.
There's another thing that you're bringing up about constraints, and I think that's what a lot of art is about, is what are the constraints that I have with this, and how do I go up against those constraints? I think with again, the Flash thing, don't need to be that the theme, but it was like, that was a constraint at the time. Yeah. Websites look really terrible. How can we open this up? We made Flash. It sucked. It was amazing with certain things, but it sucked a lot of battery out of these things, and we had to reinvent something from it. And I think there was a quote, a friend of mine was talking about, he was talking about artistry. He was like, and of course he was talking about football as in soccer, or however you want to say it. But he was like, it's the whole art of the game is the constraints. You have this perimeter that you have to stay within, but whatever happens within that thing, you can do whatever you want. You can make whatever artistry, whatever creative things you want to do, but you have to have these constraints to you. And I think that's where nowadays, I think as interaction designers, we get a little bit fearful of that stuff. It's like, there isn't any constraints. I can just do whatever I want. And okay, I'll just use Google Material Design for this because that's just the easiest. I don't have that much time. So I'm just going to plop in Material Design and use that for all of my widgets on my thing. And I think that's those are one type of constraints, but it's just, I don't know. Is it the right constraints that we need to have? And people just getting tired of something, like the dating app Tinder, it's like, hey, I don't want to have a selector box for all of these people. I'm just going to swipe. Like, how do I do? Like, maybe that's a better way to do it. Or, TikTok, it's like, hey, I don't want to just have this infinite scroll of things. I want to infinite scroll in a different way. There are things that come up every now and then that do sort of break how we do things a little bit. But I think it is probably people just getting tired of the same old. And I think there is just a designer there just said, hey, I want to do things differently. Let's mix it up. And everyone else is like, yeah, let's do it.
It related to this, like the interactions and flipping things around. I'm seeing a little bit more in the ether of the internet, a little bit more of this appeal to focus and limitations. And a website that comes to mind is Daft Social. I can't remember if it's something that we've talked about here, but Daft Social is a social network that is antisocial. And the only way you can interact with it is via your email. So you sign up for an account, you get a URL, just like any other place you can imagine with a user handle. And then all you can do is send an email to a unique email address that's yours. So you have to keep that secret if you want to control your page. But once you have that email address, you just send an email, which the content of the email is irrelevant. It has to all sit in the subject heading. So if you want to write something, you have to write it in the subject. If you want to post an image, you put the URL for the image in the subject. And then you send this email, and that's it. You go to your page, and it's all there. There's no likes. There's no direct sharing. There's no interactivity at all. If you want to see someone else's Daft Social feed, you have to know their username. It's such a shocking experience because we're used to having the hamburger menu with the home and the feed and the settings and the this and the profile and the blurb, and you need to do this. And it's kind of incredible to be confronted with something that is so restricted. Maybe, do we want more of that, Nate? Do we want more stuff like that? Is that the future, or is it something else? Like, I don't know. That's kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, the world has changed quite a lot from when we had that experimental thing where everything was cool or everything was different and wild west of things. And yeah, I mean, now it's just a different world. And when was the last time any of us downloaded an app? Or when was the last time we visited a website that was something different?
What history suggests is that, as challenging as this time is right now, like Nate, you spoke about how there have been so many layoffs. There's a lot of people who are, having a tough time finding work as well. But I think history suggests that it's in these sorts of moments that exciting changes do happen. But I think that there is this moment of great opportunity now where I don't think we're alone in feeling so dissatisfied with the state of user experience. And so I think there is this great moment of Where I think we are going to start to see some changes. Maybe it hasn't quite happened yet, but it does feel like that sort of a moment of sort of stasis where now then we're going to start to see changes. Like, back in the day when a young company called Nike approached this no name agency called Wieden & Kennedy. Agencies were well established. It wasn't as though Wieden & Kennedy was some new thing, but they just brought a much more authentic approach to the world of advertising that had become really staid. And these newer companies like Nike back then, that's exactly what they were looking for. So it feels like there's that sort of an opportunity. Now, one site I came across recently that sort of sparked that feeling for me, in a way, was this. It's actually a Portland-based outdoor apparel brand, and I believe you pronounce it Newer, but it's spelled GNUHR. I will provide links to all this in the show notes. But it reminded me so much of these old school, kind of like I don't know if you ever seen cheapcds.com or very text-based websites, but it just has such an attitude. It says, we're this, and if you don't like it, then F off, go away. This is how we're going to be. And if you like it, then you're going to love it, and we're here for you. And I really hope we see more of that. And I think there is a hunger for that. Obviously, the big brands aren't going to go there, at least not for a long time. But I do feel like there's a lot of these entrepreneurs now starting up businesses who want to be more than just clones of the last generation of direct-to-consumer businesses. So as challenging as it might seem, I guess I'd say I do feel like we're on the cusp of some new things blossoming. I mean, maybe I'm being too naive.
No, I actually, as whatever I said before, I agree, because I do feel like our culture is yearning for something else. And I think those are the moments when something comes out. And I think even just some of those interfaces I talked about, like TikTok, those companies were very much rewarded with doing something innovative, changing things up. So I think companies they are rewarded with trying these risks. And I think it's this idea that we need to keep, as a designer, we need to keep not just doing the first thing that comes up, the first thing that works, but actually what we call explore the mild to wild. And I think people will see something wild and they'll be like, hey, this is amazing, let's do it. And I think we need to just keep telling ourselves, like, hey, pause, take a break, go for a walk. and I think that's when you come up with just kind of crazy good ideas. And I think that's where we do have to jump out of those agile modes of just checking the boxes of, okay, this is what this task is done, and just sort of pause and say, okay, what am I doing? How can I make this great? And I think we will get to that. I think it's just that darkness just before the dawn, maybe, that we're thinking in right now. So we have to believe in the power of design to change the world, is what we always are told. So I think it will happen.
Okay, now the counterpoint to the old man talk. I wonder if when we see this new thing, it will be not appealing to us. It will be something that will be off-putting. And I was thinking about this in the context of just slang and language that has evolved separately now from me. I don't understand a lot of things. I just learned what Riz is. So now I know that's charisma. So that's something. And then skibbity toilet. And it's horrifying. I mean, it's such a it's scary. But, maybe that is what the future of all of this stuff looks like. And that actually is the thing that's going to push us to the next level, that there is this stuff that is just so fundamentally difficult for us to wrap our head around. But for the next generation of people, they're saying, this is our vocabulary. This is the set of tools that we're going to be using. And this is how we're going to communicate pretty deep thoughts, but in a way that isn't immediately obvious to you. And so you just have to learn the language. And once you've learned the language, you'll appreciate what we're doing here. You'll understand that there's something of value. So I wonder if that's the case.
And maybe we're thinking about it too much in a way, because I do feel like the youth are going back to the different ways of interacting. And I think that's like the physical things, LP vinyl sales are skyrocketing now because people want something more tangible. They want to put their hands on something.
Yeah.
And the same thing, I think about this all the time when I change the volume on my Sonos app or my Sonos system, which is a different UI story we can talk about later. But it's just really annoying to bring out my phone, flip on which speaker do I want to change the volume of, and swipe on the app, and it's frustrating. And it's just like, I would much rather get up, walk over to that speaker or wherever and turn up the volume. And I think these are things we've just gotten out of control with digital everything, where I think physical interfaces are much better. We're finding that with cars too. I think you guys probably talked about that before, that physical interfaces with cars are much better than touchscreens. So I think there is going to be some balancing of all of this nonsense, I think, uber digital things that is happening. But yeah, I think it takes a little bit of, and the physical aspect takes money. So I think it takes money to make dials. It takes money to do those things. And I think we will come back to a happy medium in the future. And I think that will solve some of our terrible interaction experiences that we're having these days.
Actually, that might be a good segue to something we haven't been doing recently, which is recommendations. I'm just curious if, Nate, there's anything that, whether it's a product or a digital experience or work of art that you've encountered that's really inspired you recently.
Okay, this shows my dadness, and Joachim has probably heard me talk about this before, but I'm very much into my 3-year-old's Yoto. YOTO is the name. Actually made by Pentagram Studios, or at least a lot of the design was done by them. But it is a fantastic physical device for playing music. And my kid, even when she was 2, could grab a little card and put it in there, and just it plays whatever is on that card. And they did the lo-fi thing where it has a little screen, but it's a 16 by 16 pixel grid. There's nothing else. It's just a 16 by 16 pixels for each track. And so she can sort of scroll through each track by track with just a little icon and get that music playing. And I think the best part is I can actually create my own playlist of whatever I want her to listen to and make a track and put a little icon in there. And it's fun for her to sort of have even our own books that we read to her or whatever on there. And it's a really great physical digital blended product that, again, dad points for this, right? So.
I gave it such a bad, that was my anti-recommendation like a few episodes ago. At the time, I actually was convinced that we were going to send it back, and we still have it. And I have to say, aside from the very, very annoying Wi-Fi setup and the idea that I needed to have an account, because I've somewhat neglected the device and just let my children interact with it, it's proven to be a very useful thing. And like you said, Nate, children have a really easy time with it. And so we've not had any trouble with the cloud. I have strong issues with all of that. That's a separate thing. But you're right, Nate, that it has the right amount of tactile experience and knobs, and the knobs are really, they click. They give a good click. They give a really good click. So big, fidgety kids' hands, they can feel that click as they're cycling through stuff. It is a well-designed device. I still want it to be self-contained without all of the Wi-Fi. But given that it's now at home and it's connected up, my children also do enjoy using it. But and I'm finding new ways to work with it myself, because I think as a digital designer, I'm very cognizant of the time that people spend on screens. And honestly, I would like people to spend less time on screens. And I think that's the thing where recently I've been taking episodes of shows that maybe she's watched, and I've downloaded the audio, and then I'll put that on the card. And it was quite amazing to see something that she had watched and kind of became a zombie to, that whenever I put that as an audiobook, she would actually get up and start dancing to something. And I thought, what is it about this screen that makes it, that sucks us in as a content thing, but when you make it an audio thing experience, it becomes a little bit more
you're engaged with the world around you, and it makes you do want to get up and dance. And I thought, hey, this was a nice little twist that we've. But of course, now she just wants to listen to episodes like at the breakfast table or anything, which is give and take a little bit here. So.
It's an interesting point. You're right. There's something about audio that allows us to we're able to process sound and do other things at the same time. Visual things are just too much processing power goes into that. So it is possible to multitask with audio. So is there something in that? Should we be thinking about audio as a more powerful medium for interaction and controlling stuff?
What is it about staring off into a blankly staring off into space that lets you sort of, I mean, maybe it lets your brain work in a different way to just stare off, and
I guess your inner eye takes over, right? And then the imagination can run a little bit freer. But even reading doesn't feel like such an absorbing experience. There's something about screen with movement and the world. Maybe it does tap into your brain thinking, no, you're out there in the world still. Oh.
Joachim, is there anything that you want to recommend?
Wait, there was something. Did you have something, Ernest? I bet you do.
Yeah, I could give you a minute to think about it.
You should go first. I need a second. Yeah.
We just this weekend saw this film called A Different Man. I'm not sure if either of you have heard of this. It's a pretty small film being distributed by A24, directed by a person named Aaron Skimberg, who I hadn't heard of before. It was written and directed by Aaron Skimberg. I won't. It's almost too difficult to explain anything about it, so I won't even try. But what I was really interested in was the extent to which, kind of like you were alluding to just a minute ago, Joachim, that so much of my experience of the film was a function of my reaction to it. There's the text of the film, the story, but it is so much about provoking a response from the viewer. And I think your experience of the film will really depend on your reactions and, the different ways that you respond to those provocations. I saw it with my wife and she hated it and I absolutely loved it. And I can't stop thinking about it more than anything I've seen in quite a while, because it just, without being didactic, it really forces you to question your own assumptions and values, I guess, and presumptions. And in a way that is sometimes really funny, sometimes really dark, but it's just so interesting and kind of a piece of this whole conversation. So not like the standard Hollywood fare. It's, like if you could find the exact opposite of a Marvel film, this is probably it. Although funnily enough, it stars Sebastian Stan, who plays the Winter Soldier in the several of the Marvel films, in a role like you've never seen him in before. He's really good in it. So you might hate it, but I would really recommend A Different Man.
And actually, to that point, to the A24, it's like I think they're using a little bit of that model that we probably need, which is, hey, some of these things are going to fail, but some of these things are going to be amazing. And I think they've really succeeded in the past few years at throwing out these films that just really take people.
That's actually, this is, well, maybe it's a recommendation, but it is the movie, I saw the TV Glow, which is another A24 movie, a very strange, retro, creepy film that is really about alienation and not fitting in and feeling like you're not living the right life, but also incredibly creepy. I would say it's somewhat Lynchian, like a David Lynch vibe to it, but it's a strange one. But again, like, it's A24, so we're used to this idea of them being divisive or a little bit controversial or hard to wrap your head around. But actually, my recommendation is something pretty. It's not that I think it has such broad appeal without being dumb. But it's a book by Michiko Aoyama, and the book's called "What You Are Looking For Is in the Library," and it's the main idea behind it is about people going to their local library, encountering a librarian who gives them recommendations for specific topics they're interested in. And then she always sneaks in an extra book at the end of her recommendations that she thinks would somehow resonate with this person. And she also gives them a little felt like souvenir. So someone will get a little airplane that she's made by felting, or someone will get, oh man, I forgot the other items. But so she gives them a little trinket and an extra book recommendation that they don't ask for. And then the person goes off and they're obviously facing some sort of challenge. And the recommendation is just right. But what's interesting about the book is that it's actually also a defense of books. And it's a defense of, it's kind of making the case that books are just so necessary. Like the art of it is necessary. And we need to just have this in the world. And we need to expand our definition of what is valuable. We have to expand our definition of what society is. And this book builds a really sweet, very straightforward picture, but it is also just very heartwarming. So it's a book that I recommend. And it's a vignette-based thing, but each vignette is somehow building to a very subtle Japanese crescendo. So it's more like a whisper, but it's very, very, it's very compelling. So I would recommend that book. I picked that book up as a total fluke. I was just in the local bookstore. There were various things on the shelves that looked compelling, and this was right at the checkout. And my wife was saying, "Did you want to buy a book?" I panicked and I grabbed that one because the cover looked good and it was Japanese. I'm like, maybe this is going to be okay. It was a good choice. It worked out. So I would recommend that book as a light read. I read it in a couple of days. It's one of those that's just so easy to read, but still has enough depth to it where it lingers in your mind. It's not just one of those, like, it's not just a page turner or a Jack Reacher novel, which has its place in the world, and there is great art in that. I will defend Jack Reacher books all the way to the end of time. But yeah, that's one that's been on my mind recently.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a good one. All right. Well, I think that does it for us. Nate, thank you so much once again for joining us on Learn, Make, Learn. Where can listeners follow you or find more of your work?
Oh, good question. You can find me at nategrubbs.com.
That's nice and easy.
Nice.
And we'll provide a link as well, just in case for spelling. But thank you again, Nate. And to those listening, thank you for joining us here at Learn, Make, Learn. As always, we want to hear from you. So please send any questions or feedback to learnmakelearn@gmail.com or shoot us a note on Threads at Learn, Make, Learn Show, all one word. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us for the next Learn, Make, Learn.